Good afternoon. I'm Mike Bayo with Banger Inc. And today's topic is going to be getting started with Sage Intacct Construction Payroll. So what we're going to do is we're going to dive right into the system today, and we're going to go through some of the setup items that you need to go through for the payroll system, and then we'll go in and actually enter some time. So to get into the construction payroll module, you'll go into Applications, and there will be a menu item called Construction Payroll. And one of the first areas we're going to go into here is going to be into what's called pay groups. And inside pay groups here, this is where you can set up as many different types of pay groups that you need. If you are processing payroll separately, maybe you have a particular group of employees that are weekly, another group that are biweekly, and so forth. So you can establish as many pay groups as you'd like. We'll go into a pay group that we set up here called weekly hourly. And if you go into here, what you can do is establish the frequency. So this is a weekly payroll. And what you can do is add your payroll years. So I've already added a year for 2023. So if I expand that down, I can establish my first period end date for that year and establish when the check date is typically going to be for each week. So in this scenario, our end dates are going to be on a Saturday, and our check dates are going to be on the Thursday after. And you can generate this down all the way through the year. And at this point, then you can go through and update any weeks that, maybe a Thanksgiving week, for example, where it falls on a Thursday. So instead of having payroll checks go out on a Thursday, you can have them go out on a Wednesday. Now, even if you have a check date here as Thursday, when you go to generate the checks, you do still have an opportunity to override that check date at that point. So basically, one of the first things you're going to do here is establish your different pay groups. And that's basically how you're going to process your payroll. If you have one pay group, you're going to do one process. If you have two, you're going to process two, and so forth. So if we go back, after pay groups, the next things that we're going to jump into in construction payroll is something called hour types. And this is where you're going to set up any type of hours types that you need, or pay types. Some people call them pay types that you need to set up in the system. So some examples of that would be irregular or hourly, overtime, double time, some of your PTO pay types like vacation or sick. So in this scenario, you're pretty much going to define an ID. So I've defined REG for regular. It's a factor of 1, and it's not based on any other rate. So it's basically just going to be set up as a regular rate. And some of the other things you can do here, for example, OT, if I set up an overtime type, you can notice here I can set up the time as overtime. I could put a factor of 1.5, and then down here, default hourly rate, I can get that from this pay ID, which is regular. So basically, when you set something up in the system, whether it's a rate table or employee file, you just need to put the rate in for regular, and the system will automatically factor in the overtime rate based on this setup here. So same thing here for double time, you can do it too. And the other area as well would be, for example, vacation pay. So when an employee takes a vacation pay, we're going to go into paid time off setup next. And basically what you say here is which paid time off accrual do you want to reduce? And so we're going to reduce in this scenario. We've set up 2. We set up one for sick accrual and one for vacation accrual. We want any time taken for vacation. We want to reduce the vacation accrual. But what you can do is still base it on a regular pay rate, which is what this is down here. So once you've established your hour types, another area you can go into if you'd like to track and accrue PTO in the system, you have PTO types, and then you have PTO accrual schedules. So for PTO types, as I showed a second ago, we have 2 set up here. We have one, we want to accrue vacation, and we want to accrue sick time. And then you could determine, there's not much in here to set up, but basically you're going to give it an ID, an effective date, and if you want to allow negative balance, if you want them to be able to take more than they have accrued through the year, you can check that off. Once you've established the types, then what you can do is come into PTO accrual schedules, and you can build your rules for your accruals, and you can have multiple rules set up in the system. For example, I've set up two, one for salary and one for hourly. So the salary one, we've set it up based on years of service. And what's really nice in these systems is, and you'll see this all throughout, is you can have effective dates and expiration dates. So if the PTO plan changes through the years, you could just click duplicate, set up a new schedule with the new factors in there, and put an effective date in, and the system will automatically just take effect when that effective date has hit. So in this scenario for salary, we're going to say, okay, the first 2 years, we're giving salary employees 40 hours of vacation per year. They don't accrue it. They automatically get it at the beginning of the year. So what we'll say is they're going to accrue 40 right away with a max of 40 here. So that's going to give them the 40 hours in the first paycheck of the year if they're on a calendar year for renewal. As they go to year 3 to 4, beginning in year 3, we're going to up that to 80 hours, and you set it up accordingly. And then you keep going as many different levels as you need. So in the 5th year, we went to 120 and so forth. So that's for salary. You can also do it based on an hourly accrual. So for hourly here, again, we have some years of service levels, and we'll just say beginning year 1, they're going to get 40 hours. But we've developed a factor, so they're going to accrue 0.0193 hours per hours worked in the system. So they're going to accrue this throughout the year as they enter hours. So if they only work 30 hours per week, they're only going to accrue 30 hours worth of vacation time. And so that is how this is going to work. It's going to accrue this rate every time until it hits the 40, which is the max, and then it'll stop accruing for the year. And then the same type of years of service can be set up, or, all right, after 3 years, we're going to move it to 80. That's going to increase our rate per hour. You could establish those factors. And then again, you have where you can set up new effective dates if your schedules change. Okay, so that's your PTO, and that can be set up. And we'll show you in a little bit later where you default that in the employee file. The next area to go to is something in the system called trades. So the construction payroll here uses trades not only for union and certified, but also for in-office, non-certified administration. They want you to establish a trade and a level for every employee in the system. So you'll notice here, we have your typical trades set up, and this is going to be your list, how you want to break out your trades. But for example, I do have some union stuff set up here. So for carpenters, for example, you can have a trade called carpenter, and then you could define the different levels that you need to set up. And this is going to take effect when we set up our union tables later on. So they have 3 here: apprentice, foreman, journeyman. You can set up as many of these as you want just by hitting the plus button. And then what you can also do is you can default, and there's various ways to default workers' comp codes. This is one of them. You can base it on the trade. So we can say whenever they're this trade, they're going to get this workers' comp code. So what you're doing right now is really just building the list to use later on. Same thing for laborers, apprentice, foreman, journeyman, mechanic, but also for office. So if you notice down here, we set up a trade for office. Underneath the trade, here's the different levels or departments we want to establish at the office level. So we have accounting, executive, estimating, and here's their workers' comp code. So all of that can be set up in these trades and levels, and they can be used for all different types of needs in the payroll system here. Once you have your trades done, one of the areas you can go into, and it's not required, but if you have the need, is something in the system called compensation tables. These would be mainly used for areas like unions, union payroll, certified payroll, or just to define a particular package or benefit package that an employee gets if their criteria meets the criteria that fits this table. So inside compensation tables, the prime example we'll use here would be for a union. I've set some up. So I've labeled them according to the trade, carpenter, and then the local. So basically, here's one here called Carpenter Local 220. And you just click Create New, and you could define the table in there. But I'm going to go into Carpenters that's already created. And just like before, you have the ability to do effective dates and expiration dates. And this is great for union or certified, where the rate packages and the benefit packages change based on a particular date range. So you could load up these tables ahead of time, and then basically when the package changes, it's strictly based on the date. So even if it's cut in between a payroll week in the middle of the week, it will give them the old package the first half, the new package the second half, all based on these effective dates. What's really nice is when you get the new package, you could simply take the current one, click duplicate, put in your new effective date, and update all your rates, so you don't have to recreate the table every time. So how you set one of these up is I would add a trade. And since I've already added a trade here, I'm not going to do it again, but I've added a carpenter trade. And you can expand on that. So what happens is you have a trade level, and then you have a class level. So if there is a benefit or a deduction that occurs universally for all of the carpenters, you can set this up at the carpenter level. So for example, I have a dues set up here, and I would click Add Fringe to add any more. And I have a dues set up here, and I can click dues. And in here, I could pre-fill in what the rate of percentage is or a flat amount. So for example, for this dues, everybody has to pay a due of 6.5% of their earnings. And you can set that up right at the trade level, which is basically means any class, everybody gets this. And then there might be ones that are specific, or the amounts or rates change based on the class or level they are. So for example, if they're a journeyman, there's an education fringe fund, and you could set that up. And this is a flat amount. In this case, can be a flat amount or a percent. And this is a flat amount of $15 if they're a journeyman. If they are a foreman, click on the same one here, it's $20. So you can have that set up at either level. And then you just set those up accordingly to each of the union benefit package tables that you need. Then the last thing here is if I go back and open up the levels, you'll notice a pay rate area. So this is where we're going to establish the rate of pay for this union or for certified. So for example, if they are a carpenter and a journeyman and they get regular pay, the pay rate is going to be $28 for this project, for this union. And then for the foreman, their regular pay is $35. Okay. So you're going to establish that, set that up, click Save, click back, and do your next table. And the same would be true for a certified project. So for example, I might label that same as a job ID for a certified project, and then I would have the same type of structure set up for a certified as well. And where we're pulling all of these fringes and deducts from is something in the system called pay modifiers. And what pay modifiers are basically are deductions, employer fringes. They can also be reimbursement pays. Basically anything you need to set up in the system besides payroll taxes. So some examples here might be, we saw this earlier, a dues. You can have an hour-based dues, amount-based or percentage-based. One of the big areas here is going to be 401k. So I believe it's on my second page here. I have a 401k set up in the system. If I click on this, you can establish some defaults. So we have a 401k in the company. It's effective 1/1/2022. You can put in and establish the deferment limits, the catch-up limits, what percent max are they allowed to defer. And if there's a company matching, you'll notice down here we have matching rules. So as far as what the employee is going to deduct out of their paycheck, that's going to be set up over in the employee file, which we'll jump into shortly. But you can also elect to do a matching, and you can have your own rules apply. So in this scenario, this company has a 50% matching rate with a maximum percentage of 4%. So for example, if the employee is deducting 8% for their 401k, the company's going to match 50%, which is going to be 4%. And that's underneath the maximum deferral, so it will give them 4%. If they were doing something like 10%, the 50% would be 5%, but this would only give them up to 4%. So you can establish all of that in the system. And then for the 401k, because it's pre-tax, you could determine which taxes are pre-tax that aren't applicable to this setup. Those are some of the things that you'll have in the pay modifiers setup. And then one of the other ones, which is nice, is I believe there is for example, if there's a health insurance, if there's an employer portion or employee portion, you can set up the employer portion here. And the employer is going to cover in this plan, in the family plan, $150 per pay period. And again, establish those effective dates, because maybe the policies are going to change year to year. So, if they're going to change after next year's plan, you can click duplicate. I can make that effective 1/1/2023, and the new rate is going to be $165. And when I click save, now you'll notice you have an effective date here. It's 165. In 2021, it was 150, and so forth. So you can report on all that historical changes. And then last but not least, one of the other things you can do in here is reimbursement. So when you set up a pay modifier as a reimbursement, it knows it's not taxable. It knows it's not part of their gross pay. You're going to pick the pay category of reimbursements. And then basically you're going to set up an ID. And if it's a default, you can fill the amounts in here, or you can do it in the employee file. So you can set those up to be used later. And all of these are going to be set up so you can use them in compensation tables. You can use them in employee setup screens. Okay. So from there, we did the compensation table. One of the next steps is while the system has to know which compensation table to use or union table to use. So you're going to have a piece inside construction payroll called jobs, where you can pull in your projects or your jobs into payroll, and you could determine what's the setup going to be for this project. So if I go into the Amazon office upgrade, and you have some setup in the details. So you're going to pick the job, what's the effective date, what entity or company, because you can have multiple companies or entities set up in the system. And you'll notice down here, we're going to go down here to the union locals. So if this is a union company, basically what you can say is whenever we're working on this project and it's this trade, laborers, here's the union that this should default to, local 264. So you can set up as many of these trades as you need. Then the system's going to give them the local union calculations based on this job instead of the employee file. Now, with that being said, there is also some union reciprocities that you can set up in here, where you can say if they're in the resident local is 101 and they want to get a different local, give them the home local instead of the work local. So you can set up those reciprocities in the system as well. And then one of the other things you can do here is if you're working in multiple states and this project happens to be in a state that does require the employees to get taxes withheld from that state, right in this applicable taxes here, you can dictate which state taxes and federal taxes should come out whenever an employee works on this project. And you can pick those, based on the state. And once that's set up, I'm going to refresh this screen here. Once that's set up, the last place to go for setup is going to be to put it all together in the employee file. Now, before we jump into the construction payroll employee, we're going to go into one area here in time and expenses. There is an employee section in here. And the reason I'm going into here is because in this section, here's your employee list. One of the things that you set up in this section here is how you want to handle payment and direct deposits. So if I open up an employee, and I'll open up Greg Lovett, and you go over to the last tab, reimbursement information, this is where you're going to tell the system whenever this employee gets a paycheck, what should they get? Should they get a physical check? Or is it a direct deposit? So if it's direct deposit, it's going to be set up as an ACH file. And you can elect to send out an automatic payment notification via email. And down here at the bottom is where you enable the ACH files and you fill out the employee banking information. So this is going to be required for any ACH or direct deposit transactions that are occurring. So that information is going to be stored here in the employee under time and expense. Once you go through and set all that up, you're going to be back in construction payroll, and you're going to put all that together in the employee file. So in construction payroll, I want to make sure I'm at the entity level that has the payroll again, which is Timberline General Construction here. And what I like to do is sort them by pay group. It just makes them a little easier to navigate through. So I can see here I have certain employees that are set up as my weekly salary pay group, and other employees that are set up in my hourly pay group. So what I'll do first is let's go into Lisa and we'll look through her setup. She's a weekly salary. She doesn't get charged to jobs. And she works, obviously out of the office trade. So we're going to set up an effective date, what entity, and what pay group is she a member of, weekly salary. You're going to need to put in a default trade. So she's going to be in the office accounting. There is no union. And what PTO schedule does she participate with? So as of 1/1, she gets the salary vacation accrual schedule. So this is where you're going to link that in that we set up earlier. Another area you can elect to set up workers' comp codes is directly in the employee file. So if their code does not change, you can come into here and say for workers' comp, this employee is always going to code 8810. And in my sample here, I'm using Oregon workers' comp. Then there's some miscellaneous information you can fill out for reporting purposes, for some EEO reporting and things like that. So what you're going to do here is really work your way down the tabs. So I'm on the detail tab. When I'm done with the detail tab, I'm going to click Save. And then I'm going to work my way. So I'm going to go to the Compensation tab. Now, this system, Construction Payroll and Sage Intacct, has the ability to do automatic salary pay, which means I don't have to enter the time each week for that auto salary employee. This is going to be used for employees that do not get coded to projects. Excuse me. So in this scenario, if right here under compensation, if you fill out an annual salary, and there's some journal mapping rules that have to be filled out. Basically, you're going to put in their annual total salary. The system will calculate it out automatically for you when we generate time, and we'll go do that in a little bit. In the next employee, I'll show you how to do the hourly employees here as well. So as I move through the tabs, there's no changes there, so I don't need to click Save. But in the Pay Modifiers, this is where you're going to pull in the pay modifiers that this employee is enabling for them. So for example, not assigned is going to be your complete list of all the pay modifiers you have. And when you click on them, it will put them under the assigned tab for you. Okay, so for example, we've set up a 401k for Lisa, and now you'll notice it wants to know what is her contribution details. Does she get a flat amount? Does she get a percentage? So she's doing a pre-tax contribution of 4% here. So according to our matching setup we did earlier, the company is going to pay for 2% of her 401k. Okay. So what you do here is you put an effective date, fill out the information, and click save. So for example, if this changed, maybe in 2023, she elected to up that, you would click duplicate, change the effective date, 1/1/2023, and let's say she updated it to 6% now. Click save, and now the system is going to deduct 6% for any payroll that's after 1/1/2023. But you can still see the history here as well. So we've also elected to give her a cell phone allowance in the system, and we pulled that in. But if you notice, there's no amount here. It doesn't know what to give them. So what we have to do is we have to click this pencil here and fill out what the amount is. So she's going to get a $100 allowance per pay period, expense reimbursement automatically. So we'll type it in and we'll click save. And it looks like she's already assigned to get an employee deduction for some health care, $105. And click save. And then the employer is also going to contribute $55 to her plan. So you would just go through and select the items that need to be set up for this employee. Now for union, you wouldn't have to set those up. The union compensation table is automatically going to add those in there when they meet that criteria. So next with her setup is we're going to go to now the residential taxes. So this is basically what is her resident taxes? What state does she get taxes taken out? So as of 1/1, she's out of Oregon, so she's going to get Oregon state income tax, a workers' comp, and state unemployment. So all of those applicable local taxes will be pre-filled in here for Lisa. Now, again, if she worked on a job that required different taxes, that job setup we just saw would override and trump that. But just like union reciprocities that we also have tax reciprocities. So if there's any type of agreements state to state, we can accommodate those as well. So the next step here under federal withholding, and this is where you're going to do your W-4 filing statuses. So for federal withholding for Lisa, she's elected to be married, dependent amount, deduction, extra withholding, all of that can be filled in just like it is on your W-4. Okay. Next section will be your state withholding. So again, whatever state she's going to be working in, you're going to want to click on that. So in this case, we clicked on Oregon. If it was Arizona, I would click on Arizona. And what's going to happen is the state income tax detail is going to change based on the state that I select because some of the states have different requirements. Okay. So in Oregon, we needed a filing status, number of allowance, and an extra withholding. So that's all filled out right there. And then last but not least, you can go into paid time off balances and you can get a reading of the accrual that happened. So she accrued 40 hours. And if there was any vacation taken, you'd see it reduced and deducted down here as well. Okay. So once we're done with her, we'll click back. And the only difference between an auto salary and an hourly is really just coming into here and establishing some rates of pay. So if we go into Steve, and you notice here for Steve, the difference is he's a member of the union. So his local union is going to be filled in right here. He's going to participate in the hourly accrual vacation, has a different workers' comp code. And under compensation, we don't have an annual salary in. We have some rates established right here. These came in from the compensation table, but you can also add different criteria in here that if they're not working on a union for some reason, it can look here in their employee file to get a rate of pay. So for example, if this was an hourly office employee, the trade might be office, estimating, they get regular pay, and theirs is rate of pay. So you can fill that out there as well. So this is where it's going to grab it from. All the other tabs are the same as that we went through before, so we don't need to go through that as well. So I'm just going to click cancel here, back, and we're done with the employee setup. So at this point, we're ready to get some time into the system. So under construction payroll, one of the next areas we can go into is what's called time cards. Time can be entered both manually into the system directly here, and also can be imported in from other systems via either an Excel file or through an API connection. So what we'll do here is we'll enter some manual time, and then we'll actually import in a file. So we'll go into our hourly pay group, and let's say we enter time for week ending February 4th. And what you'll do here is you'll click View Timesheets. It'll show you all the active employees that should have time for this pay group for that week. And you can see here as you scroll down, it'll tell you if there's zeros and if they're missing time. So if we wanted to enter some time manually, we could come into the employee that we want to enter time for, and we can expand the name, and it would come up to a work details screen. So what we're going to do is code where the time went to. So if we click plus, now we have the option to select the different jobs that are in the system. And I'll select the Amazon Office upgrade. What cost code or phase do you have set up? And that's coming over from projects. We'll say they're doing some cement paving work. And the cost type's, of course, going to be the labor. Now, the trade and level will come automatically from the employee file. You only need to fill it in here if it's different or if it needs to be overridden from the default employee setup. So at that point, now that you have the work detail coded, now you need to go in to pick which day this detail is good for. So for example, let's say on Monday, they worked 8 hours on this project. So we're going to hit this down arrow here to expand Monday. And then I can pick what hour type. So this is regular pay, and just type in 8 hours. You can put a note on it, and then you can just click save. So what happens is, So what happens is now you'll notice there's a mark on Monday that says, hey, this employee has time for Monday. And then you'll also notice you have an overall total accumulating as you go here. So if it's the same coding, you can keep going. You can say on Tuesday, same project. Let's say they worked 8 hours regular, but they also worked 2 hours of overtime. So you can add multiple lines here. Save. And for some reason, if they went and picked up some supplies at Home Depot or per diem, you can also add reimbursements on the fly in the same screen. So this would be the list of your reimbursements that we set up earlier in pay modifiers. I don't really have a good example here, but if we said per diem, it's a $25, per diem on that line as well. Okay. Now, if the coding was different for, let's say, Wednesday, then what you can do is come up here and you can add a new line and say, now he worked on the Kansas City, Missouri warehouse. We'll say same cost code and labor. And on Thursday, regular 8 hours. Save. And you can also just hit enter and it'll save it automatically. So when you're done, I like to shrink it back up here so you can see this employee now worked on 2 jobs for a total of 26 hours. His time is pending. Okay. Now, one of the other things you can do, and most people do a lot with this importing here, is you can come into here and then you can import time. So I've created a Excel spreadsheet that has some time ready to be imported into the system. So I'm going to pull that up over here, and I'll show you that spreadsheet. It's very straightforward. You can have the columns just really labeled however you want them to be. You can have extra columns that you can skip on the import, like employee name, for example. But this is the file for week ending 2/4 that we're going to import. There's about 5 or 6 employees on it. So to do that, I just click import. It'll pop into our import section, and I can go browse and pull that file in. So I'm going to click import rows. And now it's going to say updated data from a file. I'm going to go find that file. And that is in my downloads folder. Import time week ending 2/4. And it'll process that file in. And it's going to give you an opportunity to map those column headings. So in my case, because I labeled them exactly how the system labels them, it found the mapping automatically. If it is something different, you can come into here and you can edit the mapping, you can confirm it, and you can also select to ignore the column. So if it's just a descriptional column, you can ignore it at this time. So you can see here all my columns are mapped, and I'm going to click review. What I really like is it gives you an opportunity to see the data in Excel format inside Acumatica before you save it. What's nice about that is you can check for any problem rows. So if it finds any problem rows, you can select that. It'll show you just the problem rows. You can also edit it from here. So let's say, for example, that you just got a call, and for employee 101 on that day, it actually should have been 7 hours. You can come in here last minute and make the changes needed to be made. So when you're done with this, we've had some employees that will also enter lines in here as well. So we'll click continue. And once we do that, it's going to pop up and ask us to confirm that this is good to go. Are you ready to submit? We'll click yes. And you can see right here, it updated 40 rows. It's not going to save them until we click the Save Records button. So we'll click Save Records. And it's then going to save those time entries to the time cards. And it'll give you a little report, 40 of 40 time card records have been imported. And then it gives you a little button here where you can click Open Time Cards, pull up your week, and click View Time Cards, and you'll see all of the time that was imported. So there's the one we entered manually, and now there's the other employees that we imported in. And if you still want to see the detail, you can expand on that employee and see all of the import lines to confirm them. Okay. And now you'll notice over here, you got some nice totals, regular, vacation, overtime. All right. And at that point, they're in the system. And the next step would be to actually go through and check them off. You can select all here, or you can individually approve them. And these guys, let's say they didn't have any time that week. And then you simply click approve. Once you click approve, it makes that time eligible to have a check generated for it. So in here now, you have an approved status. At that point, the next step in the process would be to actually generate a check. And we're going to do that in construction payroll checks. And the first time you're generating the checks for the week, you don't need to fill out anything over here in the top. You simply come over to generate checks, select the pay group. We're going to do the hourly. Make sure the period end date is correct that you want to process. And we're going to do 4/2/4 here. And I'll click generate checks. And the system's going to go through and generate the checks. If there are any errors, it will return the errors, and we can go check on what needs to be fixed in the employee setups, etc. But it will go through and generate the actual check amounts for you right here. So as you see now, there's 8 checks that were generated. Click OK. And one of the areas I did skip over is if I click back on generate checks, you'll see this little function right here, include salary employees. So this is where if you wanted to include any of those employees that were getting the auto salary with no time entered, you would leave that on yes. And anybody who's in the weekly hourly would get added. Now, the ones we were in weekly salary, so none of them got generated, but I just wanted to make sure you see this is where you can say, yeah, bring in all those salary employees without having to enter time for them. So now you can see here you have your employees, no errors, which is good. There's the net pay, the earnings amount. And at this point, you can go and review that information. So you can come into Robert Jones and click on them. And what's really nice is you have this check information sheet that shows you in detail all the deductions, all the taxes, here's all the union stuff that came in. And you still have the ability to edit this information. So for example, regular, let's say his overtime should have been 3 hours, not 2. You can click on that and individually click on the day, and it'll open up the work detail for 131. And right within this entry screen, you can click the edit pencil and you can override rates and amount. So that should have been 3 hours. We called in time late or something. Make a little note on it, click save. And the system updated it and also reprocessed everything real time for us. So at that point, if I'm happy with that hour, that edit, I'm going to click save, and that's going to save the changes. And I can click back. So at this point, you're going to go through here and basically all the checks look good. We got a total amount over here, gross wages. All right. And now we're going to take it through the progression. So now we're going to select all these checks and we have actions here. We're going to have the ability to approve, post, pay, or recalculate. So if something was wrong and something forgot to get set up, you can go and actually, fix it in the employee file and then recalculate all of them or just the one employee. We'll click approve. And they're approved. And now we're going to take it through and we'll keep going here. We're going to click post. This is going to post the entry over to the general ledger and give us the ability to actually physically print the checks or generate the ACH direct deposit stubs. So this does take a moment to go through and post. We'll make sure this goes through okay before we proceed. And I got one error message here, and I believe it's because of one of those per diems that I set up earlier for an employee. So let's do this. Let's select a couple employees here and see if we get a post on this as well. I'm not sure which employee I set that per diem up. Yep. So those 2 checks have been posted. And so the reason I wanted to show you that is because what I want to do now is actually take it through and go to the pay stage. So for these 2 employees, we're ready to generate ACH files. We can click pay. And what it's going to do now is it's going to generate either a check or a stub notification to PDF file. So it says success. Down at the bottom here, you'll notice it sent a zip file to our download folder. And if I open that, these happen to be all direct deposit. So there's no checks here. So I can open up these advices and you'll see here, here's the check stubs for each employee that we can save and email out to them for their stubs. And they should be getting a notification as well if we have that checked off in the system. So once that is printed and it all looks good, you can sync the time, which gets it ready to generate the file for us. And now at this point, because we've posted it, if there are any changes that need to be made, you can still do that, but you have to go to actions, void, and delete the checks. Before we approve, we can hit delete, and then it'll just delete the information, and you can edit it back into time card. So those employees are done. So now we're going to finish off with going in and actually generating the ACH file. So we're going to approve that first over in the time and expense. So I can say, show me everything that is ready to go for ACH. I can click list. And you'll notice there's 2 employees there that we just generated. I want to make sure I use the right check date, which is going to be, in this scenario, February 9th. And you could select to pay them all in full. Now, you will get an error message if your balance on your bank is less than what you're trying to pay. I'll click save. I'll get that error message. It's going to let me go on. And those are generated now. So now what I can do is over in cash management, I can go over to the ACH file generation. And you'll notice those 2 checks are right there. So I can say I'm ready to generate the file to upload to the bank. I can select the checks that I want to do this for. Click generate file. And it automatically brings us into the ACH payment file screen. And you'll see there's the 2 that I just generated. And the status is pending. And the status is pending is because you've generated the file, but we haven't got confirmation from you that everything went okay, went to the bank, it's good to go. So you want to leave it on pending until you get confirmation back. And then what you can do is download your ACH file by clicking that button here. And I'll just open up that file. And it's your typical Nacha ACH file. This is the file that you're going to want to email or upload to the bank. Usually it's an upload in their web application. You can upload the file. Their system will confirm that everything went through. Once you get that notification that it went through, you'll click confirm here. When you click confirm, that's your post. That's when it's going to take it out of your cash and put it in, as an outstanding check. So if I click confirm, now those checks have been generated. And if I run like a bank register here, I can see that this was February. So let's move this to February for that bank. I can view that in my bank register. And now you should see those 2 right here we just did. There's the checks coming out of the register. Okay. So that's how you generate checks in construction payroll for Sage Intacct. There's some other tools you can use. There's a payroll workflow dashboard we put together. It can help you with those steps, so you can help you go through the process we just went through today. We try and put some of the reports here together for you as well. So for example, if you wanted to generate your weekly federal and state tax report that, for what you need to pay and send in to the government for payment, you can run a report here. For example, that was February 9th was our check run here. So if I click view, this generates a little report that you can use to pay your taxes in the system. So here's what we owe for FICA. Here's what we owe for Medicare. Here's what we owe for federal income tax. Okay, for those 2 employees. And the system also has construction payroll. We have the integration with the Atrix for the e-filing and your government reporting. If you click on Atrix, you'll need an Atrix account if you don't already have one. But you have compliance reporting here. So you can say, I want to report for my GC entity. And you could select the individual federal form you're looking to report on, 941, W-2s, and so forth. What's the reporting year? What's the quarter? Depending on the form that you need. Or you can do your state form. So if, if it's particular, like in this case, Oregon, all 50 states are there as well, and all the forms are there as well. So along with the government reporting, you also have the ability to do forms like EEO reports, federal certified reports, and state certified reports as well for certified payroll. And that just gets generated when I pick the form. For example, if I pick the 941, and let's do it for 2022 for the 4th quarter, I hit initiate, that's when it's going to go into Atrix and ask you for your login, for your password, which we won't go any further on, but this is where you would do that. And you can e-file your W-2s, e-file your quarterly reporting and all that information. That is a pretty thorough preview of the construction payroll inside Sage Intacct. And I appreciate you guys sticking around and taking a look. If you have any questions, please comment and have a great day. Thank you.